Got the thumbs up.
Oh, okay. Good morning.
Good
We're
morning.
going to start the Public Safety Committee meeting for Thursday, January 23rd. We'll call to order and say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Todd Capella.
Kieran Farrell.
Don Thomas.
Jim Bagoulis.
Ron Benoit.
And we're missing Mayor Allers and Jim Nicholas excused for today. So we're ready to go. Any public comment? Nope. Approval of the minutes for December 17th.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, minutes are approved. Staff reports and updates.
Good morning, Thomas Yazzo, Compliance and Security Manager at Fort Myers Beach. We are still maintaining, we've all had the bike reports, everybody's digesting that with what we're working on with that. We are dealing every day the same thing. Lee County SO has increased patrols for certain reasons and certain calls. The FD is taking certain calls that we're part of and helping whenever we can. Looks like the streets are coming back together. There's been no flooding here recently, so we're not having any issues with that. We are working with FDOT and LEDOT for the new expansion of the circle down. We've had a meeting with them, the town manager, the mayor, and several other people were involved in that. They're working on a new safety plan in some respect. They have now contacted LCSO about getting some more help down there for traffic. And you'll notice that there's been rangers on traffic posts down there as well to help keep traffic moving, keep pedestrians safe through that area. They're re-looking at some of their safety plans for pedestrian movement across that new space, and you'll see that there's lights back on the bridge again since our last meeting with them, because the bridge had gone dark when they started doing some digging and work.
I didn't notice that. That's awesome.
That's about it from the town right now, so I'll turn it back to you.
All right, well, we'll get through all these guys if we have any other questions. Do you guys want me to start with the disaster response emergency with Lee County Emergency Center? Should we start there, or do you want to give your reports? How would you want to do it?
Do the reports.
Okay, Lieutenant Chitwood?
Good morning, Lieutenant Chitwood, Lee County Sheriff's Office. I don't have anything really major to update anyone on this month, but I'm available for questions. I guess the biggest thing is I always like to talk about what's upcoming and what we're planning for. Obviously, we have spring break, our traditional spring break activities that we know start this year. I think the first colleges are, that start breaking is gonna be around the 1st of March. So we obviously have our planning in place for increased presence on the island during that time frame. And then obviously we've received permit requests from the Lions Club for the Shrimp Fest parade, which is in early March. So we're planning for that. And that's generally about what we've got going on for the future. If you guys have any questions specific to outside of the EOC realm, I guess I could answer those now.
No, I have anything.
Just one comment. I last month mentioned that it was kind of the Wild West once you got past about Sea Grape with stuff parked all over the place. It has been a noticeable change in the last month. I've seen almost nothing parked up in the bike lanes and on sidewalks and everything. It's been a noticeable shift. So, because you had mentioned that you were going to be doing more enforcement of that, and it clearly has happened. Thank you as a Southern End resident. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Awesome.
Last meeting, we talked about permitting and wanted to see if, like, as far as making sure that what Tom received as far as potential permits did make it to you. I didn't know if if there was additional permits from the town that you need to be aware of and how that system's working.
That's still in process. We're still figuring out the best standard operating procedure for that.
Okay.
So we have increased what we're asking for any special events, and we put that through into the permitting as much as we possible. And then we are in conversation conversation with LCSO Command, whatever is happening. We had a conversation with last week, just about the Shrimp Fest already, so
Okay.
we can get ahead of that, so we're not getting caught out again in the end.
And there may be a St. Patrick's Day parade on the south end. I know permits coming in soon, so.
Yeah, that hasn't been put through yet, so. we
No, I
haven't
know.
seen it.
Yeah, so, I think people are trying to cram it in real quick, so just put that on your,
This is a very busy year for all of us, and so that's what I would encourage, if you have any organizations or groups that you're part of that are gonna be trying to do anything in this time of year, earlier the better.
right?
So,
Okay.
'cause we have baseball games, we have spring break, we have the fair, we have a lot of activities this time of year, so the earlier the better, and that way we can plan accordingly.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll let them know.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chief Worth?
Thank you. So, Scott Worth for the Fire District, and I'm glad to be here. First off, I'll say I think this is our first meeting this year, so Happy New Year. It's a little late, but fireworks, well, the fireworks went off. We didn't really see much of them, but as far as from a public safety perspective, very few calls for service. I think the planning and everything that was in place really made for an orderly evacuation of the island when people were starting to leave. So other than the weather, everything with that event went really well. So I have the call volume I put in front of you on this report. I didn't dive deeper into the some of the trauma type calls, and I apologize for that, but I was working on the presentation for later today. So basically on our call distribution, it's very similar to what it was last month. We are seeing about 50-50 on fire calls and EMS calls. In normal, we would see the EMS calls about 75%. We are starting to see a tick up in the monthly numbers. We're obviously not back to where we were before Ian, but we know we don't have that many people here yet. So, any questions on that? And the only other interesting thing that I'll share with the Public Safety Committee is in December, we had the water main break, shut water off on the island for a while. So just a little bit on how that works from our side. You know, we got quick notice from the town that the water was out. And so for us, not having any fire hydrants, our trucks have generally 750 gallons of water on them. So we bring a couple trucks together, get 1,500 gallons of water, and that'll take, you know, get a stop on most fires. What we also do when we have those types of events, like we did after the storms, is we brought in water tenders from Estero as a mutual aid resource. So we had them in district, and they were standing by in case we had any kind of fire. So communicating with the town, and also, you know, when we had the flooding with the town, Public Works, we've worked with them closely. So we have the understanding if because in the storms, when the water was shut down proactively, we also know how, if we have a fire event, we know how to go turn the pumps back on. So just another piece of how we work with the town day in, day out.
Awesome.
So, any questions?
Thank you.
One last quick question. There was an accident that happened on the bridge. That was, I think, back in January 1st or so, and
It was.
first responders were trying to get to that. Did we?
Yeah.
Don't know all the details behind it, but do we have a plan in case that happens again? Because I think that
The-
was very challenging.
It was. So, you know, the vehicles we had up there and the positions we had them in, we couldn't get them and turn them around. So we did have both lanes blocked for a while, but we did have a priority patient that we were trying to stabilize and get them off to the hospital.
Right.
So I know I was in the middle of that traffic as well.
Yeah.
So it was a mess for a while. I think if you can, if you experience that, keep that in mind, because with the bridge being changing the traffic patterns, 2 lanes onbound, 1 lane offbound, we had very proactive conversations with the state DOT about not having that middle lane on the bridge for people to get out of the way. Those conversations, and I think I've talked about this before, those conversations had landed at the county level, and the county will have the switch to turn that bridge from 3 lanes to 2 lanes. And they're proactively working on putting preemption in all their intersections, which will work with the GPS in our vehicles and help control traffic patterns in favor of emergency vehicles.
Nice.
Nonetheless,
Yeah.
you got a little taste of what it would be like if all 3 of those lanes were packed with traffic.
Right.
So, and that's exactly the scenarios we were talking about with the state back before when they were doing design.
Wow.
So,
Well,
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're gonna do the disaster response for emergency presentations. So we're gonna start with Lee County Emergency Operations Center.
Do you have to call me back up again?
No.
Okay. So, I work with Caroline, if you wanna come up. Caroline Brianna, she's with, Lee County, Emergency Management.
Yes, Caroline Briones. Sorry, I'm going to bring this down. Caroline Briones, Lee County Emergency Management. Good morning, Public Safety Committee. And yes, as he said, Happy New Year, although it's almost over with the month of January. But this morning, Chief invited me over to also share a little bit about what our interactions are like and how we as the county help support emergency operations. So my blue skies job or my everyday job is Deputy Chief of Readiness. So that sounds like it's going to be your operations chief and your blue skies, and which is your kind of your good everyday, and then your gray skies, which is when we have an incident. So along with Chief, we're going to be talking about what that looks like with interagency planning. How we interact with each other, what models we follow, and then some of the resources that are available to you guys, and how we can help to assist, whether it's through the education, just the communication, and then also inviting your folks to attend some of our meetings to make sure that you have that representation as well. Yep. So as you know, we have a couple different things. There's going to be the PowerPoints around the room, and I believe this clicker should work. But as we look at the interagency planning, here in this room today, we obviously have the town of Fort Myers Beach, and then that's going to be your most local level. Something that I really like to harp on is that every disaster starts and ends locally. You know your residents the most, you know your community the most, and so you guys have the most amount of impact with them, right? So then beyond that, when your resources are going to get overwhelmed, because unfortunately the reality is that things happen, right? These incidents are getting larger and larger as the years go on, whether it is weather-based or whether it is human-caused. So the next level up would then be the county. So that is where myself and my team step in. And well, in addition to having obviously town of Fort Myers Beach, we also have the fire district and our law enforcement as well. Beyond that, of course, we would then go to FDEM, which is the Florida Division of Emergency Management. So that is our state partners. And then we go federal, FEMA, and then, of course, there's some regional assets and regional programs, such as Chief mentioned, possibly those mutual aid resources, whether that's internal to the county or just a little bit more regional. So I'll kind of click through this and we'll talk about it.
Sure.
So we follow something called the NIMS framework. This is a standard. It stands for National Incident Management System. This is something that you will see every single emergency management agency follow. That's kind of how we standardize our profession to ensure response across the board. It's how we hold ourselves as a profession to that standard. So there's three major components about NIMS, or that framework, which is going to be resource management, command and control, and communications and information management. And I think after any type of incident, we always say that, it's kind of a joke, but we always laugh that the biggest issue with every incident is always the root cause of every divorce, communication. So how can we, knowing that that is the issue, how can we work to minimize that and mitigate those issues? So from the resource management, that's everything from your personnel, your equipment, and your supplies. And we have that ability to then be able to work with you guys to order said supplies, order said additional people. There's a lot of great assets, whether it's, like we mentioned, locally or statewide or even federally, that can come and help us out. With command and control, we're talking about how we're going to interact with the various agencies, but then also what is a manageable span of control. For example, when it comes to the fire districts, we have 18 districts plus additional right through the cities and our port authority, but 19 people is a lot of people to manage, right? So 19 agencies. So we try to bring somebody in to then, kind of limit that span of control to maybe 5 or 7. So that's maybe where you'll see those geo divisions come in. Later on, the communications and information management, that's very straightforward, both internally to you guys, well, anybody that is serving in a capacity representing FMB, or also forward-facing to our public. Another thing that I love about emergency management is what we always say: we're flexible, scalable, adaptable. That is what NIMS is teaching us, because things are going to change. We have to be able to be flexible in order to meet those requirements of whatever is coming our way. Scalable also, sometimes there's going to be incidents where it's maybe only 5 people working. Other incidents are going to be up to 300 or more. So this framework allows us to make it modular and be able to grow as needed. the standardization, as we talked about, amongst emergency management teams across the entire world. And then unity of effort. This is why we're all here today, bringing the various agencies together to ensure that we have a unified approach to things. Nothing is harder than when one organization is sharing one message and another organization is sharing an opposing message, because ultimately it just confuses our residents. So how can we work together in these blue skies days, even when it's 40 degrees outside, to come together and make sure that we are taking that unified approach to things? You want to talk a little bit about?
Sure. So we talked about standardization concepts and languages. So one of the things with operational functions under standardized titles and qualifications is the framework sets out a whole manual, if you will. So when we need resources and we're putting in for resources, they have a very specific fire engine, class 1 fire engine, class 2, and that means something different based on it. So they've identified all the typing and the verbiage of what you're actually calling for. You'll see on the screen I have I talked earlier about a tender to have extra water out here when the water main was broken. In our world, we used to call those trucks tankers. You know, it's a water tanker, right? Makes sense. The tanker is actually flying in the air in the forestry world. So in our terminologies, when you get into that national framework, a tender is a truck and a tanker flies. So that's kind of an example of why the typing and the standardization for the stuff you're requesting matters so much. You know, if the county or the state's calling feds and saying, hey, I need tankers, you know, you're gonna get a lot of planes overhead. So, just an example. So, just a little more on the resource descriptions, and then the language that we use. I think it's pretty much covered here. So, if you want to hit the next one. So on this slide, you'll see that is the cover page of one of our incident action plans. So those incident action plans, we're building them at the local level, and that's kind of where we'll go next. We wanted to set this up so that we showed you from the national level how all the pieces can work together. We're gonna now get to the local level and then build back up to involving the county in our needs as we're responding to our local emergencies. Okay? So, any questions on the national framework? Okay. Okay, so the way we put these slides together is basically saying, all right, hurricane season's starting, because we don't start these events when, you know, the storm's coming. It's before season. So now it's June 1st, and we're getting started. So our governmental entities individually are looking at the plans, but they're plans that we've collaborated on. By looking at them, it means, do we have the resources we need? Do we have shelter facilities insured? And we're doing all of our pre-work, all of our pre-planning, making sure we have all the stuff we need. We're ensuring our staff are trained on the plan, and we're ensuring that our physical resources are in place and that they're all operational. A lot of the stuff gets put away till next season. We're pulling out cots. Are the cots dry rotted? Do we need different cots? Our staff being trained on the plan. When we come back into district, we use softwares that the county maintains so that we can do our damage assessments. That software is reporting directly back to the county, and they're getting real-time dollar assessments and how severe the damage is based on the stuff we're putting in out in the field. So our people, we retrain them on that software. Do they know how to use it? Are they gonna be able to hit the ground running when we need to do our assessments? We confirm our interagency coordination's in place. Did Tom and the town change their plans at all, and do we understand the changes that were made since last season? So we're coordinating proactively in that way. And then ensuring third-party contracts are in place, which we do a little bit of, but Caroline, that's blue skies for her all year.
Yeah, and if I can add in, we typically say that hurricane season is the busiest time of the year. However, the county actually takes an all hazards approach, so we account for all the various hazards, even beyond hurricanes. But hurricanes are typically the ones that are most well known. So with that running from June 1st to November 30th, that's the season, and everybody says, okay, December 1st, you know, we're good to go, we can enjoy the holidays. But that actually becomes our blue skies busy season, because that's exactly what we're doing between, you know, December 1st and, you know, what is that, May 31st, we are busy trying to make those plans. Anything that we saw that said, hey, this was an area for improvement, or we need more training on this, or this didn't work out, that's that time frame in which we're trying to do that. Because in a perfect world, we're gonna have everything up to date and say June 1st, we're good to go. We made those changes, but we also understand that it takes time to make those changes, and so we want to be thorough. We don't want to just completely switch and do a 180. So that's why this time is actually most important, to make sure that we're making sure our folks feel confident in the procedures that they'll be doing and those processes, and the software is exactly what you're sharing.
If you'll notice on that first screen, Lee County is in the middle of it, because even though, like Caroline said, all things are local, and we're trying to handle it local. Imagine if Fort Myers Beach, imagine if I was calling Nations Rents and saying, hey, I need to rent a trailer mounted generator. And I was calling Ball Gas and saying, hey, I need to put on hold tanks and fuel and whatnot. And Sanibel's doing the same thing in the city of Fort Myers. So they've established those contracts. So we put our resource request in to Caroline at the county, and they distribute them out, because they know how many other requests for generators they've sent to Nations Rents, and now they're sending us over to the next rental place. And that's the reason for the system to be set the way it is that when we need those extra resources, and we know everybody else is calling for them, it muddies it up if Nations Rents already gave our generator away to somebody else. So we run it all through them, and they can coordinate. They got a whole logistics section at the Emergency Operations Center that is sorting and routing those requests. Because you can imagine the manpower it would take for each individual government entity to be doing those same things.
Yeah, and the boots on the ground folks, they're doing the physical labor, the real heavy lift, right? They are right there on scene, directly serving their communities, and as is the EOC, but in a completely different capacity. Our roles allow us to take that step back, take, several feet above, to be able to then look down and say, okay, what is the bigger picture? What is happening over in Fort Myers Beach? What is happening over in Estero? Do we need to reallocate resources? Or does someone say, actually, I have this resource and I don't need it, please send it to somewhere else, versus Town of Fort Myers Beach now then asking and contracting that out, it's on their own. We might have those resources locally. So I think there's another slide that talks a little bit more about that, but I think it's a great place to show. Just, it's a little bit easier when the county can manage some of those contracts, just to be able to assist our various municipal partners.
How much did you guys, so you have Ian, we implode, you learned, obviously. How much did that help you? Like, did you, when it came to Milton and Helene, was it like, okay, we mitigated 50% of the angst that we had with Ian because we went through the worst of the worst? Did you see, obviously you had a huge chunk, I would say, that was corrected, but did you guys ever talk about, oh my God, by changing all this and learning all this, we've learned 85% more of what we used to do and changed it that much more?
Yes, and I think that's, me personally, I think that's one of the joys of being able to do what I do, is that you're never gonna have a perfect plan. You should always be striving to improve it and to be able to tweak it. And so, unfortunately, there's going to be incidents and disasters that come around, and they show us what some of those weak spots are. It doesn't matter how many times we have trained and tried to improve upon those. And I think there was a significant change, and from the feedback that I had heard from various partners as well, there was a significant change in response. And of course, the disasters were very different between Ian and Helene and Milton, and even with Debbie that we had in August, there was a significant change. But there's still several other areas where we said, hey, we didn't maximize this. Let's figure this out. How can we tap into this even more? And we're very fortunate that we didn't have to tap into that function, but let's hone in on our skills now, so the next time this does happen, we're that much more prepared. So yes, we are definitely recognizing that, and the county just approved a formal after action report to be created from the 2024 hurricane season. So we are looking forward to documenting those changes as well. So this is a fun one, but now what do you do with the hurricane season is actually coming? So I'll let Chief a little bit talk about this one too, but this is really when we have, so preseason and, just on a day-to-day, we are a resource that you can reach out to, that Chief might call me and ask me for a question, or, hey, can you come attend the Public Safety Committee meeting? And we're happy to do so. But as we see, incidents, specifically storms coming around, that's when we're going to start to really have that multi-agency coordination. So there's going to be everything from National Weather Service calls that everybody is going to be encouraged to listen in on. That's where we share, okay, this is what is happening from the weather side of things. Okay, well, what is your organization currently doing? What are your thoughts? This is what we're looking at doing. How can we help support you? It's really just regrouping to make sure we're all on the same page. And that way, if anybody needs to know, hey, actually, I was going to follow suit with what this organization is doing, that's the time to talk about those things. And then implementing the actual response plans. this is where we actually put those plans to the test, right? And as we talked about, hopefully we have learned and improved from prior incidents and made those changes so that way we are that much better at responding and supporting our community. If you want to talk a little bit
Can you jump
about.
up to that last slide?
Yep.
So a little more on the multi-agency coordination. Let's take it down to our level here on the island, the Fort Myers Beach fire community, which goes into the mainland a bit. So in the 96 to 72 hours before the storm hits, we're somewhere in the cone of uncertainty. So leadership for the town, the sheriff's office, and us are coming together. We're not involving Caroline really at that point because we don't know what's gonna happen. But we're starting to brush off the plans, we're going through the plans that we each have individually, but we know they complement each other. Okay? A little further in, what we're gonna get to is when we have an actual event, and we see we're gonna have an impact or a near impact. Now we're building incident action plans. Okay, so that's a little bit different than our standing hurricane plan. So just to kind of paint that picture. But again, like Caroline said, we're at the local level, we're meeting typically in here or at my office, and we're basically spitballing. There's a lot of interaction between the town and between the sheriff's office and how they manage people coming back on the island. And we all just gotta make sure that those meetings are where we're sitting here and going, okay, we're staging at Target, our pinch points are Pine Ridge and San Carlos. No construction changed that this year. We gotta do this different thing. So we're just kind of making sure we're all on the same page in case we're gonna get an impact.
So obviously from the town side of things, we have, there's the town, there's the county, there's the state, there's federally, there's all different types of orders and declarations that could happen. So the declaration of a local state of emergency or state of local emergency, calling back additional staff, that definitely falls back on the town of Fort Myers Beach because every organization is going to be so different. But typically that's what we see is we anticipate some of those impacts. And so we want to make sure that we're requesting our staff to come in a little bit earlier to say, hey, one, we want to make sure you can get here safely, pre-impact, and then two, be able to complete the work. And so that's why it's really important on that side is to support the staff and themselves to make sure that they themselves have and their families have plans. So if they are called away to then work, that they're able to separate the two and say, okay, I know my family has a plan. I know my family is taken care of. That allows me to report and do my job. And then, like you mentioned, preparing the resources, whether that is pre-staging any types of items, and then securing facilities, especially being over here in, FMB, we have, there's obviously the water component as opposed to, the actual ocean versus other areas in Lee County that aren't going to be directly impacted. But how can you secure those facilities should you need to evacuate at some point? How can you harden those, the immediate mitigation versus some of those longer term mitigation solutions?
Just a question on the callback additional staff. Are those full-time employees that we're just bringing in during that time period, or are they temporary workforce?
So that is, when you take a job at Fort Myers Beach, it's understood that you are emergency personnel. You are obligated to come back as soon as possible in the safest manner to get back to work. So that's all of our full-time and our part-time people here.
Okay.
The EOC is a different creature. They have some of the same respect when you take a job there, with the fire department, the PD. It's part of when you take the job, you understand the obligation that you have to come back.
And that can mean different things. So for us, we run 3 shifts. So I have 2 shifts that aren't on duty.
Right.
So based on the severity of the storm, the last slide, you saw that severity of the storm, the timing of it, the path where it's supposed to hit. Those things all drive how many folks I bring back in.
Okay.
Typically, we'll at least double staff. So if I've got 15 on a day, it's gonna go to 30. So we will call back additional staff.
Okay.
One thing for them is that their staff might have a normal title 365 days, but in the emergency management plan, they've got to put on a different hat and they're going to take a different role. So it can, it kind of plays there too.
And to kind of add on to that, I think a lot of organizations, their human resources have taken a very proactive approach to addressing some of those questions and or concerns. And so you'll actually see them in the job postings and job descriptions. And I think that is definitely to help clarify and set that expectation from the get-go. There's no question of, oh my goodness, now I have to go in. No, this is the position you applied for. It was clearly written. And so that is that expectation to protect both parties on there. We see that in other municipal partners. We see that here in the county. At the county, we have something called E-roll or emergency roll, and that's exactly what Chief was talking about. We hope that your Blue Skies roll is going to be very similar to your Gray Skies roll. However, we also recognize that the skill sets you have in your Blue Skies role may be very transferable to a completely different role, but that skill set is there. So then we'll work on those training components to then you have the skill sets, you have the training, and then you can actually execute and serve in that capacity. So this is really important as we talk about that communication component. So when it comes to public information, it is that unified message once again, because unfortunately people tend to panic, right? So where am I going to turn to for verified information? News is great, but news is not always consistent. So that's where we advise turning to your government, your local government. With that, the Lee County government pages typically will be the lead with that, and then we encourage all of our partners to then be able to share some of those messaging, which I think it is, right? So emulating the messaging, so reposting and making it hyper local, but that way the standard is set for everybody, and everybody's receiving that information at that same time. There's other areas that we work on, so not just social media, but of course there's going to be the actual news media. There is we have the Lee Prepares app, so we also encourage folks who have the app on their phone so they can see more information about, for example, what shelters are open, just updated information that is specific to Lee County in general.
If I could add to that, you guys have had conversations, Jim, we talked about
Yeah.
putting together pages for Fort Myers Beach and stuff. As I was putting this on the slide, the bullet point, primary is Lee County Emergency Management. We really do want to be passing the same information that the county is passing. So when people say, you'll often hear if I'm doing media interviews, I'm gonna say, you can look at our website, but understand we're reposting what the county is providing you for information. They're the primary source. So we might build on it, but we're always going to be careful not to counteract or do something different than what the county's offering for information.
And to be clear, the county's a very good partner in that. They do speak to the command staff for everyone before they create that message.
Of course. So a little bit about that. We have something called the JIC, J-I-C, or Joint Information Center. So that is comprised of our our communications director. So we have Betsy, as well as our community engagement staff. So that is Katie Welton's office. So between the two of them and their teams, they are looking at everything from, okay, what are we getting calls about from 211 about? That mean, right? If we're getting tons of the same calls, we're going to have to then start doing more messaging on that topic, because clearly there's a lot of questions. They're looking at rumor control. They're working with the various PIOs for different municipal partners and other organizations. They're working with the news media to ensure that we are able to advise and set those times for specific interviews and press releases. So the JIC is a really nice thing because it's bringing all those different partners together. And that way you don't have to have multiple people doing the same job. You can clearly identify that these are the different areas in which we need to work with. And because the Lee County takes the lead with that communication, that's why it falls under us. But they're on site at the EOC, so if there are any questions that they can quickly go over and say, hey, can you clarify this real quick? Let's make sure that we're all on the same page, that this is the message we are sending out. So they do a very nice job with that. And if the town's PIO has any questions, I'm sure that they have already worked directly with Betsy and Katie, but they are a great resource as well.
And so I'm just to say, so all of this has gotten much better since Ian.
Thank you. I'm excited to hear that.
Yeah, because I was here afterwards, and that was the biggest thing, was being here and trying to find out what was going on. What you're saying right now is what I wasn't hearing back then.
So one thing I will say about Ian, let's call it a 100-year storm.
Right.
If it hits next year, there's going to be a bandwidth issue next year too. So, I mean, we had resources from from this entire country that were scheduled, called in, they were passing information to the state, the regional coordinators, to the state, and the feds. So, those early days in an event of that size and magnitude, you're still going to have some frustrations while we're catching up. There is a reaction time to us catching up to this storm that just wiped us out. Okay, so I don't want to paint the picture that if Ian hits again, it's going to be like it was during Helene. where we had everybody back on in 24 hours.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
We're still gonna have 7 days of search and rescue if the island gets wiped out again like it did after Ian. So it's the track, the intensity, how bad the impact is going to affect how quickly you're starting to feel your sense of normalcy. So
Yeah, I guess,
I don't wanna paint that picture that the next Ian and I'm gonna have you back on the island in 24 hours.
and I'm not even talking about that, I'm talking about once we were here and trying to find things out,
Yeah.
it was
Yes,
basically
and so
non-existent.
what I can say is that the collaboration with the fire department and the town, is heads and tails above what it was during that first couple weeks. So the town had a private, incident management team. We had the first 2 weeks, the state of Louisiana incident management team. They were the big brother to Fort Myers Beach Fire Department. They were working with, the urban search and rescue teams, first out of Miami and Jacksonville, and then from all over the country.
Mhm.
And you've heard me say that we got up to almost 1,000 responders on this island in the 7 days after the storm, looking for people that were alive and human loss. So, but from the town and the fire department and the sheriff's office, proactively, we're coming together. Our plans are more in sync. And what did come from Ian is we had a month, 6 weeks of having national incident management teams on the ground,
Mhm.
making incident action plans every day. So my assistant chief made 30 incident action plans with FDNY sitting right next to him, you know?
Yeah, we saw them
Overseeing
in the
the whole
morning, yeah,
process.
yeah.
But that took a little bit of time to get going. The next event, that won't happen. So the collaboration is there, and I'm confident that those IAPs are gonna happen pre-storm, and they're gonna happen through impact, and
That's
all
what
the
I'm
way
saying.
into our coming back on the island.
It's
So
great
the
to
end-
hear
It
that.
is, yeah. But
Yeah,
Yeah.
we can do these tabletops on this training all day long, but when you have these events, there's nothing like it. as
oh,
far
I
as
understand,
that
I'm,
experience.
I'm one of you guys, I'm
Yeah, I
retired
know.
fire, so.
Yeah, and I appreciate hearing that, and I definitely feel as if it has been a more positive relationship and a more transparent relationship between the various organizations, which I think is all we can really strive for, is right. But I think Chief was definitely right, is unfortunately no two storms are the same, and so, making sure that individuals are aware of that and that you should always be proactive in your preparation efforts, because there's no promise that your next storm is going to be a Debbie or it's going to be a Helene or a Milton. Unfortunately, things change, and that's why it's so important to pay attention to, you know, whether it's the National Weather Service when they are providing that information about what the storm actually is looking like and how it's tracking.
Good question.
Great.
Good question.
Do you want to talk a little bit about your business calls and what that looks like?
Sure, so, this slide's kind of showing you now, we're at the point where we are, we're getting closer to a storm actually hitting us. At this point, so basically where we are now is that when we drop the state, you saw the state of emergency, and typically what you'll see is that the town and the fire department, we're dropping our own local state of emergencies, and they're very well coordinated with when the county and the state is. So at the point we drop our state of emergency, one of the things that does for us at the fire department is it puts our collective bargaining agreements on the shelf. Now, we follow those as best we can, but if I need to cancel time off, I'm canceling time off, and a lot of things are happening. The other thing that happens is at the start of that state of emergency is all the documentation that ultimately is going to be used to show everything that was done by everybody for their timeframes throughout the whole event. Because all of that information is the blue sky stuff that we're doing, is working with FEMA. And we'll be working with FEMA for years trying to close out Ian and the other storms that have hit us since then. So all that documentation comes into play as soon as we drop that state of emergency. That's also something that's happening. So our staff is putting aside their blue side tasks, and they're processing 214s and all the paperwork that's needed to detail out everything that's happening. So those things are happening. We're starting to build incident action plans, not our hurricane plan, but now for this incident, we're building our incident action plans. Typically, we're building those out in 24-hour periods. So our shift starts at 8 o'clock. We usually go 8 a.m. to 8 a.m. the next day. And here are the key objectives in that incident action plan that the fire department wants to achieve. Now, because this is scalable from the national level down, those forms We break it down into disciplines, if you will, and you got the fire discipline. And we'll have our incident objectives. And if we start doing, combined incident action plans with the town, or even with the sheriff's department, they're gonna give us a page and say, here are our objectives that we're doing. You know, Matt's objectives for Fort Myers Beach for the next 24 hours are A, B, C, and D. And Tom's objectives for the next 24 hours are A, B, C, and D, and they all have their own page. And now we're all sharing that same plan. So my employees, his employees, Matt's West Division, they're all seeing the same action plan for all of us for the next 24-hour period. So that's what's happening, in the events when, in the time when we know a storm is coming.
If I can, on the collaborative incident action plans, the other part of it is it allows the subject matter experts and those leaders to actually identify what they're doing versus having somebody outside that scope say, I think you should be working on this. It allows those leaders to say, you know, this is what we do on our blue skies days, this is what we're going to do, but just in a more ramped up, maybe more aggressive approach. So that collaboration, I think, is really key, and it brings those people together, once again, not just in meetings like this, but to make sure we're all on the same page, we're aware of what's happening, you're not going to be questioning, or if one person says that they're bringing in this contractor to do X, Y, and Z, the other side is not going to say, who are these people and how did they get on this island? It's very good situational awareness.
That was one of the big lessons learned from Ian, is the town was working hard to get the town back open. But they were staging debris trucks, and, you know, on day one, they didn't need deep debris trucks till day 7. Okay, so that us getting together, they were working with their incident management, team that they hired, and we were working with ours. But if we had been together, we'd have been able to say, no, you don't need debris trucks until search and rescue is done. The urban search and rescue team is projecting this to be 5 to 7 days. So that's just an example.
And I think especially with that and other resources cost money, so if you can work collaboratively, ultimately you're going to be saving that money as well, and if you look
Yeah,
at
if
the
they're on the
big picture.
ground and they're not working, they're still charging.
Yeah.
So,
That still comes into real quick, I'm sorry, after
Yeah, jump
Milton and Helene with the cleanup. So the town hired some of its own, but it also piggybacked to contracts that the county holds and piggybacked to other townships, so we came together, put those things together, and that made things happen faster, and it was a little bit more smooth. Now, that being said, it happened faster because we didn't lose every bit of infrastructure in the space. We still had operating infrastructure. Our streets were open fairly quickly, but that was because of those piggyback contracts. And it was a different creature. So to the chief's point, Ian was a whole different monster than what we've had recently. So we have to recognize that. You look at that for where things were done wrong, but you also have to recognize it was another monster. So we have to move forward with that and stop, kind of going back to that, other than as a resource, as things that we could do a little bit better, but also understand that, to the chief's point, if another Ian hits us, there is going to be a delay. It's not gonna come back as fast. So everybody, I just wanted to make that very clear for everybody, because people have a misconception, and we've had this conversation before about, it's not Hollywood, it's reality. And where we fall with there somewhere is people have to understand that reality is there. I know people want things back really fast, but we have to do things the right way too. So, sorry, just wanted to make sure that was clear.
The next couple slides are going to be talking about the incident action plan itself. I will give the caveat, I'm going to let Chief talk about the incident action plan of the IAP, and that's because it's going to be very tactical. We'll see some of these meetings here, the tactics meeting. What are you actually going to be doing, right? Versus us at the county, at the EOC, we're going to be inside that room. You know, we're not going to see the light of day for quite some time. So rather than going about it that way, we do something called the Lee COP, or the Lee Common Operating Picture. So it's very similar to an incident action plan, but it's not going to be as rigid just because we're not doing those tactical items and tasks. But it does follow very similar to the planning process, and we still do have a meeting schedule that we follow in accordance with that.
Thanks. So part of the incident action plan, like I said, this is more at the local level. So what we're doing is we're planning not for today, we're planning for what's gonna happen starting at 0800 or 8 AM tomorrow morning. Okay, so this planning process is happening one day in advance, and the whole process is approved and given to the incident commander stamps it, and then at 8 AM or before 8 AM that next day, we're gonna bring together all the troops. And these incident action plans, we put a QR code on them, they can scan them with their phones. So we're having a briefing, we stood out behind Station 2 every morning before 8 AM. And the incident management team from Louisiana or FDNY, we were all out there and, okay, here's where we're at, these are our objectives. A lot of times what happens is that your first plan takes more time because you're putting your initial objectives on paper and here's how we're gonna do it. And then day by day after that, especially after the storm hits and you have a long recovery, your objectives will be tweaked from day to day, but not necessarily wiped away and completely put new objectives in place. So if you will imagine, in this process, we have a group of people. Let me see, I think it's on the next slide. There we go. So we will basically identify, each of us will identify a group of people that we give a new hat to, as I talked about earlier. We'll have incident commanders, and in a storm event, we'll have multiple incident commanders. So we'll have probably the town manager and myself, and maybe Captain Laylor from Sheriff's Office, and we're all incident commanders. We work under a unified command, which means we're all speaking as one voice. We're collaborating on decisions that have to be made and orders that have to be given. Each of us will probably have an ops section chief, which is handling the operations. And then supporting under that, you have a plan section chief, which is putting this document together and it's bringing all the pieces together. Logistics is all the things that we need, whether it be more personnel, equipment, supplies. And then you have finance and admins doing all the paperwork and making sure the checks are getting written. And then finally, a safety officer who is going to look at the overall events that are happening today. And they're going to bring safety messages into that plan for tomorrow that they might see. You know, today we were on the ground, it was our first day back on the island. We had washouts, we had a couple vehicles that drove into a washout because they couldn't see it because there was still water standing. So you'll have a safety officer whose job it is to bring those safety messages, to give any reminders about, wearing your safety equipment, power line down safety, watch for lightning and all those different things. Okay, so we're starting at the bottom left corner on the top of the P there where it says ICUC. We're developing those objectives and that's the first meeting. Okay, and in this meeting, we're at 10,000 feet. What does the island need? What do we need to do to support that? What does the town need to do to support that? And what is the sheriff's doing to support that? Okay, and those big picture things are coming together in this particular meeting. Okay? We are, at this point, we are bringing it together, getting ready for a tactics meeting, which like Caroline said, we're getting down more into the how are we gonna get these things done? So we've got these big goals, how is it we're gonna get all those things done? So we're working at this point, the ops section chief is working, is in the IC meeting, they're hearing those big objectives, and they're having to think about how are we going to accomplish these things and what do I need to accomplish them? Okay, so that's what's happening at the tactics level. Ops section chief is now laying out what the tactics need to be for us to achieve our goals. Stop me at any time if there's questions, if you will. Okay, so during this tactics meetings, this is where the section chiefs, which is going to be your finance, it's going to be your ops, logistics, they're all collaborating on how to get done what needs to be done. And this is the point where the safety officers bringing in all of those cautionary tales. We need to think about this, we need to think about that. And a lot of what happens with that is those safety messages will get logistics thinking, it'll get operations thinking, and we'll have to put in emergency orders for equipment. I need search and rescue helmets versus trying to wear that heavy fire helmet, 8 hours a day, all day, because I'm out doing search and rescue. High water boots, we might be putting in an order for 100 pairs of high water boots and whatnot. Okay, so the tactics meeting gets finalized, and we're getting ready for the planning meeting. That's the fourth meeting in this cycle. The plan section chief is, and the plan section chief is kind of the facilitator for this whole process every day. They're wrangling the incident commanders and saying, hey, we need your new objectives. They're wrangling the rest of that command staff and making sure this all stays on schedule. So in that planning meeting, it's, at that point, did I miss one? Yes.
I don't think so.
Okay, so the plan section chief is bringing together the tactics, they've kinda got the plan for the next 24 hours. That plans meeting is being, held and it's being presented for basically the, unified commanders. Okay, the unified commanders are gonna look at that plan and they're gonna say, all right, are our objectives being met? Are we clear on what our objectives are? And you can go back and say, you know, the commanders could say, no, that's not exactly what we're shooting for, and you can go back and make some revisions. But ultimately, what happens is, in that meeting, the plan's being presented, and it's being provided to the incident commanders to basically give their approval. Okay, so when we get down to the end of that meeting and everything looks like it's good, you know, the ops chief, the plan section chief, I'm gonna, if I'm that guy, I'm gonna say to the ops chief, I'm gonna say, do you support the plan? He says, I support the plan. I'm gonna ask logistics, do you support this plan? Yes. Then I'm gonna look at the incident commanders or the unified command, do you support this plan? Yes. Okay, now I'm taking the plan and I'm finalizing it, and I'm getting it ready for distribution to go out to everybody for the next period. So that's happening, it's kind of the process of how it's happening every day, getting ready for the next day.
So in emergency management, we refer to this as the planning P, because as you see, the very first part is the incident event, and then that's what leads you to then now the circle portion of the P, and then as every day goes on, which I think is the next slide.
I'm
Oh,
moving forward,
just kidding. Oh, thank you.
yes.
As you go on, you'll see that you'll just keep going around the circle until it's the end, and then actually it makes an arm. When you go to recovery, you boot out of it. But that's kind of how we follow the process, and so every day typically does look the same from the management side of things, because we wanna make sure it's that standard approach.
And so this is the fifth and final meeting, it's 8 AM the next day. We brought the troops together, and now we're sharing with them what the objectives are for the day. We're sharing with them the safety messages, we're taking any questions they might have about the plan and how to implement it. And then once everybody's good, it's and break and everybody goes to work.
Any questions?
So this is a 24-hour cycle. One thing that we've been talking a lot about is input into this, as far as from residents, from the town, from, because this is before the storm. So it's kind of that planning, and we've been talking a lot about, like, how do we alert to say if people are staying in their homes during a storm versus evacuating. So it is within this cycle, is there an input feed? And I think that's kind of what we've been talking about. How do we input into this cycle so that, you know, Lee County knows, okay, yeah, we have X amount of residents that are staying on Fort Myers Beach during this hurricane, that we prepare for that. Just don't know if that's
Sure,
part of
so-
this cycle or not.
Right, so some of the things we've been talking about in this meeting, and I've mentioned to you, are ways, so what we found organically after, I get them mixed up now.
Yeah.
Milton.
Oh, that's,
Helene, I'm sorry, Helene, we evacuated, so it was Helene. We had over 1,200 people,
Mhm.
and that happened organically, where they were telling us, look, don't break my door down, nobody's
Right.
home and the
Yeah.
building's fine. So, on our end, we're working on automating that form, and it'll be on our website, and that's messaging that will go out through the well, for us, it would probably go out in addition to the county's messages, cause it's unique to Fort Myers
Yeah.
Beach.
Okay.
So, that's additional messaging that would go on our site, go on the town site, with Jennifer and his Nicole.
Yeah.
Working together and sharing that information.
Okay.
So the town also has, and we have people, so when you guys give us that input, we're doing our best to integrate it into these plans in real time, as
Yeah.
much as we can, which is what happened on the fly.
Right.
We changed our processes in our IAP, and I had to assign a couple people that handled all that messaging, collaborated it together in something that we could use. So, but I know you're talking about something more proactive all the time.
Right.
So, can you talk a little bit about, the,
Our alerts.
your alert system and getting people to sign up for that?
yes, so a couple things. The first thing I want to say with the planning process, I would definitely advise that is your, that's going to be your employees, essentially your instant commander, your unified command, and all the respective staff. I would not see, there's not necessarily a resident input in the planning P. However, under the tactics meeting, one of the thing, or if we go back to the objectives, maybe one of the objectives is clear communication with residents.
Yeah.
So you might be having, I think you said Nicole and
Yeah.
Jennifer, they might be leading those efforts. So
Right.
we might not bring a resident into the planning team
Right,
meetings.
right.
However,
A
there would be
representative.
an employee who is dedicated to focusing on those areas, and that could definitely be a set objective, is that clear communication. On the other end, so I think that's a perfect note. So from Lee County, we're going to push out those Alert Lee systems, right? So you can go online, and we advise, I think we post about it just about once a month or so. So we encourage our partners to then be able to repost that. But it is a free alert system that we can utilize to let everybody know what is happening. So if an evacuation has been ordered, if there's other specific life safety measures that need to be taken care of. So that's a free resource that we advise everybody to utilize. And then on the other end, because now we're talking everything starts and ends locally, what's that next step beyond that is specific to town of Fort Myers Beach? And that's, I think, what you guys are working on, which we definitely support, because that's your specific residents. You guys would be taking the lead on that hyper-local level.
Jim, do you think an information line where people can call in both for the town and the fire department, how would you expect to give us real-time feedback?
I mean, it's,
Well, you go ahead.
well, there's we've been talking about through apps. There's the proactiveness, which is there's two parts of this. There's the residents, and also there's our visitors. And I think that's may end up having different plans for them. But overall, what we've been talking through is that from an application standpoint, apps, people have their phones on them all the time. So it's a good way to have that. And we've talked about Lee County giving one-way communication, which is excellent. It's how do we get the two-way, and that's where this all started from, was like, how do we reach out to people and then they respond? So through an app it seems to be the way from that standpoint, but also we also think about, like, during Hurricane Ian and others, cell phone services really are tough. They're sporadic, and we can't always just rely on it because of that. So it's what else mechanisms can we may have as far as phone calls or other ways of alerting to say, like, yeah, I need help. Of course, you got 911, but there's also the, hey, awareness of something's going on, and that someone should be aware of.
Of course, and unfortunately, not all means of communication work after an incident. So,
Right.
In a perfect world, if it is, 211 is another great resource to be able to share that message out. So, if and when Lee County posts, please call 211 for the emergency hotline. We request that you guys kindly share that as well, because we will have call takers that will be answering all of those questions, and it's just a simple 211, and it doesn't have to be that full phone number that people are trying to remember. So that's a great resource. And then, of course, it depends. I think that preparedness is truly it's everybody's responsibility, from somebody who is, a 5-year-old who's learning about how to pack their bag if they need to somebody who is the household leader. It's everybody's responsibility. And so if they're interested in also getting involved in understanding how to utilize radios, because radios are another great means of communication, that's another resource to tap into. And how the town decides to then go about that, that's really up to you guys how to implement that. But I think those are some great considerations of how do we get that feedback back.
Yeah.
Well, I think, based on the last one, I called in because it wasn't electronic, and the poor lady was doing everything manually. It's not during the hurricane that you're doing this, you're doing it prior, and I think that the whole thing is it's hurricane season. These are your steps. Did you get your pass to get back on the island? That's number one you gotta take care of. Number two, are you signed up for alerts from everything? You should be signed up for that, which I'm gonna bring up something on that. And number three, if hurricane's coming, these are the three things. Did you get your pass? Did you go to www.blah blah blah and click to tell us that you're leaving or safe? Then you have the if you don't have a phone, like somebody, I don't know who doesn't have a phone, but he doesn't have a smartphone or a computer, maybe someone older, here's a phone number. So maybe that would mitigate the number of calls down from down 90%, so most people are doing it electronically. And then I was just thinking, we should make it mandatory for every single person who moves onto this island. Every realtor hands out a flyer that says, oh, now you're a part of this community. This is a hurricane community. it's mandatory, I mean, granted, you don't force it, but you need to sign up for these alerts. You need to know this hurricane protocol, because you're gonna thank us that someday you've just bought this beautiful new house on the Gulf side and you do not want your door broken down, so these are the kind of things you need to follow, put it in your know, and every realtor who's talking to somebody, when that house closes, here's what you need to do, log in.
Or even through the rental companies.
The
Short-term
rental companies, you're part of a hurricane, and you probably need to put this in your phone, and in case something happens, because this is what you're gonna need to know.
I think there's already a lot of resources, it's really just tapping into them, right? It's
Yeah,
that outreach
It's really
component.
just telling people how to do it, we already have it, it's
Yeah.
not difficult,
So
but,
between realtors and rentals, when you're targeting those new residents, also grocery stores, setting up a table if you have either volunteers or an employee that can go there from 9 to 12, you know, on a Saturday or some, you know, if you can recruit volunteers to do that as well, that's another great opportunity. You're gonna get people that are walking in and out, and hopefully, excuse me, if they see that logo, they'll be open to receiving that information.
yeah.
Right. And
I just wanted to add to your input process, we, even though we want people to prepare, a lot of times they don't. So the sheriff's office catches a lot, I don't know what the percentage is, but a lot of the post-storm emergency calls. And so we log those, we track those, we prioritize them. So, and basically the analysis of what those calls are goes into that planning process. We're seeing these kind of things being needed from the community. So I just wanted, so that there are coming in, there are inputs that come in from the community, not necessarily, you know, through formal ways, but just people calling 911 and saying, hey, or even the non-emergency line. Simple things that you know, like, hey, where can we find gas? You know, if we start seeing a bunch of calls of what gas stations are open, we'll push that out. We'll talk with our partners. Hey, can you push this out that these are the gas stations that are open? Because the county is affected very differently based on where the storm hits,
Yeah.
where the storm lands, what direction it comes in.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, the east part of the county everything may be open, where the west part of the county might be, you know, nothing's open, nothing. We saw that, I can't remember if it was Milton or Helene, but basically, once you went east of 41,
yeah, it's all open.
everything was fine, you know, and then west of 41, things progressively got worse. So that's, you know, there is an input process. I didn't want you to think it was just like, okay, we're not taking any input from this point. We get those from those different directions. So.
And so something to keep in mind is, here on the island, you've got 4 information lines. Right there, you got the town, you got us, you got the county, and you'll typically see the county blasting theirs on all the media outlets. Media, you know, they'll pick up our stuff, but they're primarily focused on the county, cause they're the hub. And then you got sheriff's department. So you actually run that risk of, well, did I call the right information line, and, you know, are you really on Fort Myers Beach, or are you visiting somewhere else in the county?
Right.
So it's hard, I mean, we do the best we can, but we all have staffed information lines for people to call in.
Yeah, I believe it was Dan mentioned last meeting of having one place for the truth. So even because we do on Fort Myers Beach, they'll have evacuation, like just evacuation notice, but also prepare for a hurricane. These are all the tools that you need and everything. It was, but I think what he was recommending was having a page designated like.
So he was basically talking about, if we're sharing information, can there be a Fort Myers Beach hurricane page?
Yes.
Which
Feeds
which we
everything
can
too.
do.
So you have one location for everybody, and whenever they hurricane, go to this site. And that would be the feed into Lee County, and all the whole community can go focus on that one site. And I think that was, you know, one of his ideas that he was thinking through.
Yeah, and so I know right now we do have leagov.com/storm, so that's typically your one-stop shop. But once again, you're right, it doesn't account for the hyper-local nuances. There's
Yep.
going to be certain things, but if specific programs that either the fire department is, or fire district is leading those initiatives, or the town is, those might not be captured on the counties. But for general information, we definitely advise that you go point them there. But correct, if there's that one landing page, I think we found it to be most successful.
Yeah.
And one last thing, you mentioned just about the synthesizing the information from the calls. That goes back into that JIC, that Joint Information Center,
Right.
right? Like we said, the 211 calls, we do the same thing, and we have representation from LCSO there. We have a Town of Fort Myers Beach agency rep there as well on site, so if we are seeing things, there's plenty of time, there's plenty of interactions and opportunities to have those conversations.
So that's when you started, it's about communication.
First thing that goes.
It just, one thought, as a condo resident, maybe the idea of a volunteer network, because a lot of people do stay because we're 3, 4, 5 floors up. We know the water's not gonna get that high. Where can I put my truck so that it doesn't get washed away is my biggest deal, but anything under about 6 feet, I have a plan for. So, you know, we're kind of likely to stay because we are a few floors up, and since there are so many large condo buildings on the island, maybe a volunteer network of representatives from each condo association or even each condo building that's a kind of a focus point of contact between that condo association or that condo building and the emergency management office to say, here's the situation with our building, we're okay, don't worry about sending emergencies, rescue people here. There's
So-
nothing going on here. I mean, maybe,
So Todd, are you envisioning something where your association understands this in blue skies, so it's training before the season? And you would have one person that would report the status of all the occupants, or, because I would think that would take the collaboration of all the occupants to know not to call after you told the HOA. The HOA is taking responsibility for reporting for everybody?
right.
Is that what you're thinking?
Or even, I guess I'm thinking in the immediate aftermath. The water starts going back down. For instance, we stayed for Helene, we left for Milton.
Okay.
But after Helene, I mean, we're literally out there when the water was back down to 4 or 5 inches deep.
Yeah.
Walking around in rubber sandals, already starting to
Don't-
to clean
don't
up
do
and
that.
pick up. Yeah, yeah. Well.
Close your names.
Yeah.
So, but at that point, just saying, here's how. I mean, I'm just thinking on Bay Beach Lane, we've got 40 different buildings, and undoubtedly every single one of those buildings has a half a dozen or so full-time year-round residents, and so that's. And I'm
I
assuming
think
that.
that goes back to some of what the lieutenant was saying, is they end up grabbing a lot of those jobs. Like, when a call comes in, they take that, and that's part of their assessment. So, and that does get turned out to most of us. A volunteer situation is totally gonna have to be something that's created outside of these agencies.
Right.
So that would be something that you would have to have as a
Your
neighborhood
HOA
group.
has to come up with
Almost like a
it.
neighborhood watch, emergency
Yeah.
neighborhood watch type thing, so that's a different monster than what we could create. I think that would be a task that's a little bit too monumental in some respect when there's other stuff happening.
But like
Or just the
Ken-
idea of a
Well, you could-
framework,
you
a
could-
possibility of a point of contact, so that
Sure.
if
Well, you could
we can
suggest it
develop
to ever
something.
the HOAs down on the south end, or they say, here's an idea, it's hurricane season, these are what's going on with the town, we're doing this. If you would like to create a one person or a team that's a liaison for everybody in your building, if this stuff happens, you're responsible then for everything to contact this number. But you need to, maybe, you're gonna let them know that, okay, 125 Estero you're gonna get one phone call from all of us, and we'll do this all clear and whatever. I mean, that's something I think we have to teach the HOAs if they wanna do it.
So I think
something
that's, I'm
different.
trying to decipher what I'm hearing, but are you thinking it would be good if we proactively shared with the HOAs how they can best prepare and integrate with us? Is that what you're asking, is that what you're thinking on our side of how we can help?
I think he's saying,
I'm almost saying more
there's
after.
one, after the fact,
Right, but
there's,
beforehand, you
You'll have to
beforehand,
train
I would say
we have
there's,
to train them.
Yeah,
before-
we have to train beforehand.
you'd have to
so,
train him, and
yes.
John Smith is the main contact, and everybody, and he stays through these storms, and if he doesn't stay, he has to recruit somebody else in that building, and they have to make sure everybody's safe. I mean, that's a lot to put on somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just because I know in my building alone, there's only 40 units, and there's only 5 or 6 of us that are that are full-time residents, so we kind of keep track of each other, you know, going in to the storms and after the storms, and yes, there were a few that we worked very hard to boot out, you know, the 75-year-olds in their Camrys. Well, where can I put my? You can't get off the island. Please go. There was there was some of that, but I mean, we, especially the full-time residents in these buildings, because since we are so far up, there is a natural tendency to ride stuff out, maybe more than somebody in a one-story house right on the water. And I'm just trying to think of ways to kind of leverage that. I mean, I remember talking with Mayor Allers that one of the things that the town found out was they don't have the equipment to do a lot of stuff. And I'm like, well, I've got a big, tall four-wheel drive F-250. I can pull stuff off the road to at least make Estero Island passable, so that the fire equipment and the sheriff's office equipment can get up and down the island. I'm just, you know, I understand we're a small community of sub 4,000 people, and it's, you know, there's only so much equipment, there's only so much manpower that's available. I'm just trying to think of a way to leverage the volunteer army. I mean, no, we may not be the Cajun Navy, but I mean, you know, every single incident that happens on national TV, you hear about the Cajun Navy heading to, you know, 4 states away
Right.
to help do this and do that. Well, let's have our FMB army that's doing something as well.
And I think that
Good
it goes back to that communication component that we talked
Yeah.
about at the very beginning and all throughout, and, I don't think that there's any issue with that. I think that's a great idea to be able to tap into your residents and the knowledge and information that they have. However, what does that process look like? And I think this is definitely a great start, but it seems like there's a lot of moving parts that would be, right? Who is the lead agency responsible for receiving that information? Do they have the capacity to take on all those calls? In theory, I think it is a great idea to engage with them to formalize that process, but I think taking some time to really look at that structure would be, beneficial.
just-
Yeah.
Yeah, throw some spaghetti in its wall and see
See
what
what
sticks.
sticks.
Yeah.
Just for sake of time, I wanna be
Yeah.
respectful of your guys' time, but I think we're just about to wrap up our
I think so.
presentation. So we kind of gave an overview of some of the interagency coordination, how emergency management, our NIMS, or the National Incident Management System framework, is how we kind of standardize across the country. And then also what it looks like locally in terms of the specific plans that we're doing every day, so how we decide what we're going to be doing, and not just today, but tomorrow and beyond. These are some of the points of it, making sure we have those common goals and objectives. We're prioritizing what needs to get done, of course, a short recovery time. We wanna be thorough, but we also wanna make sure that we are providing that immediate assistance to our residents and our visitors, as timely as possible. And then that feedback and collaboration, because ultimately we want to minimize the redundancy. We don't want the same or two different organizations to be doing the exact same task and have no idea that they were doing that, because time, personnel, resources, they are limited after a disaster. I'll quickly go on this one, but just talking about those resources that we mentioned earlier. So at any point, a organization gets overwhelmed, right? Depending on what your organization is, there's a couple different ways you can go about things. So Chief added in here a little bit about the ICS Form 213, the resource request, but I'll also briefly talk about another way that we can do it. So, for example, from the town side, we, at the EOC, we encourage our municipal partners to have an agency liaison. So that's somebody who's typically sent from FMB, the actual town, an employee that is going to be going over there and sitting as that liaison to participate in the municipal calls or the municipal meetings and be able to hear and be on site. So that's your representation. We really encourage you guys to send over an individual to have that on site. That person is gonna have a login to a platform that we use, and they can say, okay, I've been talking with my management and with, town leadership and the incident commander or unified command, and they're saying that this is a resource we don't have. So then they'll go in and they'll type in that resource request. It goes back to the words that you're using. So are you asking for a tender, or are you asking for a tanker? Are you asking for a bulldozer, or are you asking for a however large bulldozer plus the operator. So you have to be very specific in what you're asking for. And so something that we're doing on our end is we'll be doing a training to make sure that those folks that are putting in the resource requests are a little bit more common with that terminology. So because if it's a clear request, we can move it on versus saying I have to send it back to you for more information. So typically, if it's from the agency, they'll go ahead and they'll put that in. It'll get sent to the section coordinator or the section chief, I should say, who oversees that. And then, for example, anything under operations will come to myself or my deputy. We'll review it, and as long as it aligns with the mission and our objectives, we'll move forward, and that will get sent over to logistics. Logistics will then do the same thing. They'll say, hey, do we have this resource locally? Does somebody have this? Do we have it ourselves? Do we already have a contract for it? If yes, great, we'll go ahead right away. Or if not, hey, this is beyond our capacity, that's when we go to the state, and the state will then help us out with that. And the same thing happens for
Right.
fire.
So on the fire side, where each of the municipalities in the county has a seat at the EOC and has a terminal and everything, Fort Myers Beach Fire doesn't. Estero Fire doesn't, Sanibel Fire doesn't. So what we have at the EOC is we have a fire desk. It's made up of 2 or 3 fire chiefs, administrators from around the county, and they're our point of contact. So as have our resource request, we also can log into their web EOC and do it and put in our resource request. But there are times when there are nuances, there are specifics where we can get with the fire desk and we have somebody to talk to that can walk out onto the floor and go find the right logistics person and say, hey, on that fuel tank, they also need a power supply with it, or whatever the case might be. So there's 2 or 3 guys that are representing all the fire districts around the county in the EOC. So that's how we accomplish it on our side.
And just back to that, the chain of command, so for example, if it is a fire district that is requesting it, then the fire branch or that fire desk person has to approve that mission before it then comes to me and then to logistics. So it's just making sure, that's how we ensure that, your leadership knows what you are requesting and what you're doing, and that's our validation process to make sure it is supporting those objectives that we've identified.
And those things overlap too, by the way, so you could have, the fire chief could be part of the FOB up front, or the lieutenant, is part of the FOB, and they say, hey, we need to get this. And instead of,
What's the fire?
forward operating space.
Got it. So they know.
Yeah. They're gonna be up in the forward operating space where they're on boots on the ground. And if the fire chief needs something quick, he may not be able to get it, so he goes through the town, and he goes to that. So they'll send it through our operator who's there, and then we put that out. So they do overlap in some respect, so it's just so there's clear, there's always information moving in, and then they will go and contact the operations desk for FD at the EOC, and then it goes back. So everybody's in that space to see and understand.
Yeah, for example, after Ian, we originally were trying to drop fuel tanks out here, on our property, so that we could have some fuel. And at the same time, the town was trying to get fuel tanks, and they were right behind the town hall, what was left of it. And so, we were getting calls from logistics, hey, I've got 2 requests, and they're almost next door to each other. Okay, so move my fuel out to station 32, because we realized quickly that the amount of fuel that the town had requested, and that we had requested, would serve us individually, but it wouldn't serve everybody.
Yeah.
So, and with the town having their own incident management team at the time, so one of the biggest things I think we've learned from Ian, I don't think the town's retaining a private, incident management company anymore. But then I talked to Caroline before Milton and said, if we are looking at a direct hit and it's big and bad, I'm gonna be talking to you while we're in shelter and asking for an incident management team. And I'm probably gonna ask you for a type 1 because us and the town are gonna share that. So that's the kinds of things that we did learn. So had we had a major event, we would've had an incident management team, full-scale team, rolling in here, and we would've been working together from day one.
And
So
that's,
those are lessons learned.
yeah, and I think that was the perfect point of going back to what the EOC does, right? We're able to then be removed from the situation and say, and catch those either overlaps or errors, and maybe they're 2 completely different missions where, actually, no, we need them to be 2 separate ones, please keep both of them proceeding. But we're able to then kind of see what's going on and if there's any duplication of efforts and be able to clarify that. So then, obviously, as we talked about, resources have costs associated with them, so that way they're not just sitting there unused or not being maximized. So typically when that happens, when we actually have a resource, what we'll see is daily or, every couple of days, we'll be calling those points of contact to say, hey, are you still using this? Do you still need this? You know, that way we can start to demobilize those assets as soon as possible, so they're not waiting, you guys aren't spending the money, that way if they're not being utilized. But of course, if they're being utilized, we will keep them there and we'll advocate to have those resources available for you. And then the last thing, just kind of a couple other things of, I don't know if this is a question, but I always hear the question of who reports to the EOC, and like I mentioned, so of course we have the agency liaison for you guys for FMB, but there's almost 100 people in that room, so there's everything from, like we mentioned, fire branch to law enforcement branch to an LCSO specific representative. We have our Exactly, we have our medical branch, our health and medical, so that's anything from Department of Health to, the county EMS.
Bringing up a hospital.
Mhm, yep,
Temporary hospital.
yep, our hospital systems, our mass care, which includes our shelter staff, we have representatives from utilities and power providers. We try to bring them all in, so that way we are able to respond as quickly as possible. And yeah, I would say with that one, it really just is it's that interagency collaboration. So while we talk about being off season right now, this is when we're starting to meet with those partners again and say, hey, this worked really well, let's keep doing this, or let's tweak this, or what are we not tapping into, or how can we make this even better? Verifying who's going to be coming in and who that point of contact is. That's what this off season really is for us right now, is cleaning up and making sure we're continuing to build and maintain those relationships and enhance those plans. And then the final one, it's not on here, but the one I wanted to talk about, because this was something new that we did, was the implementation of the community coordination teams. So this happened post Ian, was the island coordination teams, and then we tried it again during Helene and Milton. And we're now looking at formalizing this program. So the county has the community coordination team program, or CCTs, and that's when we're gonna have county staff that we will train on how to engage with the various stakeholders and leaders in these different communities. And post-storm, it's not going to be all islands, but if there's other areas that might be impacted, we'll deploy those teams, and there'll be that kind of on-site representation to say, hey, we're working on this resource, but can we get a little bit more information? Or maybe those areas, maybe FMB might not have the capacity or the experience, and might need a little bit more county support, and that's how those CC teams would really come in. That's where we saw the comfort stations, for example, being set up. They were the ones that kind of oversaw and said, okay, yep, these are being utilized every day, or we're down to one person a day, and those are the boots on the ground folks that really are going to be a resource to our community partners. And so we're very excited. We just brought on a full-time employee to develop and maintain this program, and so I think moving forward, and there will definitely be a stronger presence of those, and like we talked about, that standardization of the program as well. I think this is our last slide, but I would say, did anybody have any questions? I know we provided a lot of
That's the last
information.
No, that was
There
awesome.
you
There we go.
There
Sorry.
it is, questions.
No, I think it was wonderful.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
It gives us ideas to think of stuff as they come on with the communication effort for the island, which I wrote a few down.
And from the county perspective, of course, I know that you interact with these folks every day, but we really are a resource for you, so please don't hesitate to reach out if there's any questions that you guys have. We're here to help.
Right. Is there anything that we can do for you? Like as far as our committee, Public Safety Committee on the Beach, we're here as a committee to help and drive awareness, but also to figure out certain programs that we can then continue to drive forward and work also with the town council to make those things happen. But the forum today has been excellent. I think we've learned a lot, which is important. But is there things that maybe we can do to kind of drive the awareness or the programs forward? Is there
Yeah,
anything you could think of?
I have two that we already talked about, but just to kind of to hone in on them would be the EOC representation. So whoever the town is sending over, just making sure that person, of course, knows the town that the area that they're in, the community that they're serving, and hopefully is a decision maker, because the benefit of having that person on site is they can walk over. If they see that one of their resources hasn't been touched or approved yet, they can walk over. They can, hey, can I ask a question? Exactly. What was the hang up? Do you need more information, right? And so having somebody there that is very confident and feels comfortable having those conversations is a huge benefit to you guys, and therefore it's a huge benefit to us, because we have that quicker response time, hopefully. And then the other side is just the clear communication to the residents, and just making sure we have that common message. I think unfortunately there's a lot of fear around
hurricane season and preparedness, but as we talked about, we take an all hazards approach, and so we want to make sure that people have the resources to prepare themselves beforehand, but not just for hurricanes, for all the various hazards that Lee County is susceptible to.
And I think Todd hit on it, you know, you said what can you do? The biggest thing is to heed the messaging. But like Todd had hit on, I think, you know, if you're part of a community or an HOA and you hear, oh, it's June 1, hurricane season, you'll hear it on the news.
Yeah.
And blasted everywhere. Get the hurricane guides.
Yeah.
Start working proactively with people that you have an affiliation with. If you're in single-family houses, it's a neighborhood thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's a good reason to have a block party. We're talking about, we're gonna have a hurricane block party. Hurricane planning block party.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, you know, anything you can do to help neighbors, you know, and I think that's kind of what you were alluding to, is gonna be best.
You
So,
can, I say, you guys can implement certain fun things, right? A simple outreach item is doing a raffle per se, of a hurricane go bag that might have a radio, a flashlight, a couple other items that you might need in there, maybe some of the MREs or the meals that you can eat, a case of water, anything like that. Right, so if somebody shows you that, oh, if you have done X, Y, and Z, those 3 things, right, you've already gotten your permit back onto the island, you've already filled out the 2 respective forms, perfect. Any individual that completed that, they're entered into a raffle, and that's an easy item that you can then give back to them to help prepare themselves for the upcoming season. I think just engaging with them on little areas like that, I think would be very helpful. Thank you all for your time, I
Thank
appreciate
you
it.
for
you.
coming
Thank you
out.
so
And
much.
thank you all for everything you do.
thank you.
I'm guessing you two need to get going. Thank you, we appreciate everything.
You're welcome.
That was informative. I guess we have, member items. Is there anything anybody wants to add? That was a long day, a long meeting.
Not here. I just hope, I hope everybody watches this, cause that was very informative
I agree.
for everybody to watch, so. If there's, if you just let people know to watch today's meeting, that,
Yes,
it's
I
not
agree.
it's not the boring one like, they probably think it might be, but.
Very informative.
Jim, you have anything?
No, nothing to build today.
I'll come back because I want Tom to hear. Well, I did the shared pedestrian and, bike proposal, and it's really vague because I don't know pricing or cost or things like that.
But it's a
I want-
great start.
I wanted to give it to Tom to say, you know, is this something that we could have everybody look at, like somebody on your staff, you know, to plug in some numbers and let us know, cause I don't even know where to start on it. And then, I have been noticing there are more and more bikes on the sidewalk, which is fine, but now we're getting with more people and it's getting very congested on the north end, and I do think we need to come up with something, because the other day I watched someone on the bike and they're like beeping the horn, and there were 4 women on the whole sidewalk, and finally he got frustrated and just got up and walked. I'm like, they're not gonna move. They're not gonna move if there's not some kind of delineation of saying,
Yeah.
you need to share with the bikes. And it's also, there's not enough room. There's just not enough room. And that was over by, like where the sheriff's office is, like, so it was.
Surf club,
Yeah, by the
Yeah.
surf club.
yeah, it gets
So,
tight there.
I don't know, I wanna ask Tom about this, so when he comes back, we'll come back, and, the only other thing I had was, I'm glad about the lights on the bridge, I was gonna bring that up. And it sounds like FDOT is, and the sheriffs are coming up with some ideas, because, even, and I'll bring this up to him, I don't understand why we don't have a sign that says, as you're leaving by Margaritaville to exit the island, no need, or left-hand turn does not stop.
Yeah.
So you keep it going, and then traffic, opposing traffic must stop, or whatever,
Yeah.
however that
Yeah.
signage they have, that, I can't think of what the actual name is at a town. in a-
Oncoming traffic does
Oncoming.
not stop.
There you go.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then.
Which there is
Or oncoming
now
traffic does not
coming the
stop,
other way.
please stop, and
Is
then
it on the north-
left-hand
from the
side
north?
says,
When you're heading
left-hand lane is
down
not.
Crescent, when you're heading west, I guess on
Out of downtown?
Crescent, there is now a sign, I just noticed it yesterday, that says opposing traffic does not stop.
Okay.
Okay, that just then happened, because it was not there.
Wasn't there?
Yeah.
Okay, so then that's coming from up, cause that wasn't
That's
there
coming
this
from like
weekend.
Matanzas Inn and,
Yeah.
Sure.
and from the Back
Which
Bay
we
area,
need.
you're coming up, you're right there beside Lighthouse.
Then they need
Yes.
another one on the other side saying, left-hand turn does not stop.
No, there is no stop, period.
There's
Yeah,
Seems
but
to
that
be
doesn't
straight.
matter, they've been conditioned, everybody's going,
Yeah.
oh.
Well,
it's-
I think
and
a lot of
they
that has
just-
to do
they
with,
need
you
to
still have
put
a big white line
They
right
need to
there
put a
too.
body there.
And they had one the other day.
'Cause it's gonna
even
take a
he-
while.
Even the person doing this, they're going, and you watch them.
Yeah, and they still
Yeah,
stop.
another one too for, you know, Times Square straight ahead, so people keep going, because otherwise if you make that left, you can't get to the north end of the island, because you're leaving the island.
Yes.
So something's gotta be there to tell people that to get to the north end of the island, you gotta go straight and come
Yeah.
around through Old
It
St.
is
Carlos.
amazing though. We
Yeah.
left the island maybe a week ago. They had done everything they said they were gonna do. They pulled out the no left-hand turn lane. And there was a woman in front of us and she slammed her brakes on. She was trying to flip a Yui on a Sunday and the traffic was coming and we were honking going, you can't do this. Go off island and turn around and come back.
Yeah.
And she ended up pulling into the construction, waiting and like she was gonna flip a Yui. I'm like,
And that whole area is a construction zone. How is it not fenced off?
I don't understand it.
I mean, you're talking about, now they went through, and I assume this goes back to what Mayor Allers was talking about. There was supposed to be, in some of those areas, there were supposed to be plantings to keep people from
Right.
walking through there, and it was just flat concrete, just
Yeah.
begging for people to accumulate there, and now I see just in the last day or two, they've busted that all back up. Somebody got back and said,
Right.
this isn't what this is supposed to be.
It's gonna, once this weather
But-
turns and the people are here, it's gonna be very,
Yeah.
very crazy.
We've dodged a huge bullet so far this month because of the weather.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, because there's
Yeah.
just not that much going on, but,
And even again, the lighting, I keep asking, why can we not have two little lights? If you're coming from Margaritaville, on that little walkway they created that's orange to cross over to Times Square,
Yep.
two little lights to, show that this was a pathway, cause otherwise you do not see it. And at night, you definitely don't see it.
No, you don't.
yeah.
I don't know.
And honestly, the, what are they called, the Moby mats or
Yeah.
whatever? I mean, we should have just made a temporary sidewalk up in
Yes.
Crescent Park or whatever.
Yeah.
And then get rid of all that, just get people away from the road.
That's
Cause,
not bad.
I mean, the whole thing is a construction zone. People
Yeah, 'cause
shouldn't
we were right up there
be
quite a bit, and when you're leaving from the Times Square area, you end up just getting off and walking across that spot. You're talking about
Yeah.
going down to the corner and then crossing back again, because there's no way you're gonna
Yeah.
try and ride a bike through there. There's no
no.
way.
Right,
Or walk.
yeah.
The whole thing is, I don't understand why they haven't created a pathway. I mean, it is bad.
'Cause right now
And how are
they-
you gonna handle if someone's handicapped?
Cross the street, wind your way through, and then have to cross the street again just to make it from Crescent
Yeah,
to.
Let's ask Tom.
Here
real
comes the man.
Here he is.
You're fine. We have a question. Is there any plan on the sidewalk? Okay, we were talking about a bunch of stuff. But, okay, let's start with, we were just talking about sidewalk,
Okay?
Crescent Park, a Moby mat, so that people, right now, there is no sidewalk. Some are walking along the road, some are walking in the sand.
So I can answer that. So that was actually brought up to FDOT on their plan over there. It was brought up by the mayor
Good.
already to them in the last meeting we had with them.
Okay,
So they said they were going to try to mitigate that in some manner, either moving it farther into Crescent Park to do some type of safety space. There is the space that they have set up now,
Okay.
which is all paved and they have to cross there. And that's where we came into what lighting we have there, increasing lighting and all
Good,
this,
we
all
talked
this
about
stuff is
that.
spoken to. They've already started to work on that.
okay, good.
And they're coming to the conclusion of that project. I know it seems like it's forever, but they are working. If you look, they've taken some cement out of those
Yep.
median islands,
Yep,
and that's going back to our best information of what we requested is that they go back to the original plan, the landscaping, to keep that from being just a big pedestrian walkway.
crosswalk, right.
You know what I mean? So that's something that they're working on now. I know that was something that they did listen to what we had to say to them about the safety issue of that. That's in the works. down
Okay,
there.
good.
Okay.
And then Todd said he did just notice there's a new sign coming from Matanzas up Crescent that says opposing traffic doesn't stop.
Yes.
That's new. And so then people coming down, going left, are they ever gonna put a sign like left-hand turn, no need to stop, or no stop, I don't know what the actual terms is.
So,
Or is
that-
it just
that's
a
something
guide?
That's why we're putting staff there.
Okay,
If you
got
notice,
it.
we have rangers on post
Yes, I
there.
noticed that.
During the heaviest traffic timeframes,
Yeah.
we're putting a ranger there now.
Okay.
LCSO is now also gonna be part of that. They're gonna be
Awesome.
coming in for the light space and down there as well. So we're working on that. And
Okay.
it's a staffing issue and trying to finance it. And the town is actually putting a tremendous amount of extra money into making sure we have rangers set up there. So, just so you guys do understand that we are making
Perfect.
that happen.
And when, oh,
Yeah, I'm gonna be the jerk here, but I've gone through that intersection a number of times, and I'm gonna say 80 or 90% of the times the ranger is standing on the sidewalk chatting with people,
Okay.
and there's traffic
We
still trying to
can
find its way
address
through.
that. I haven't seen that happen and my people are there. It's the first time I've heard it, so I'm not saying it's not true, I'm just saying
Right.
it's the first time I've heard it. But I will address to make sure, and sometimes they do get out of the way if traffic is moving fairly smoothly and they're dealing with a complaint from a citizen, they will get off the road to
Sure.
do that and make sure we're aware of it. So if that's the case, I will definitely address that. But I haven't seen it and it's the first time I've heard it, so
Okay.
let me deal with that part. Back to your other thing with sidewalks, you'll notice that that's clearer, and you said that earlier, we've written a tremendous amount of summons in that space down there. The rangers and the SO have done summons to keep people, that's why you're seeing it clearer now, because they're
Yeah.
understanding they will get a ticket.
Huge
And that was a
difference.
safety issue, so
Huge
we
difference.
did that. I'm sorry, Dawn, you had.
no, that's fine. I did a joint sidewalk bike proposal. It's about as vague as you could get because I don't have pricing or anything like that. And I don't know if it's something the town, the staff wants to look at as a guide.
I did, you sent it to me.
Yeah.
And I did take a look at it, we're still working on it, it's
That's
something
fine.
that has to go through.
There's
the
so many
management.
hoops, right?
Yeah.
I just am noticing, you notice the bikers, so just an idea.
And there's some stuff that's added to it, actually, the fire chief actually just created something, something that we would like to see LEDOT in place, because we know that Estero's gonna have to be redone at some point here with all the damage from the past storms.
Yeah.
So it's something that, I'm gonna present to management and ask them to see if they want a recommendation.
Yes, that was
And we
approved.
brought those to the council did a vote on it. As of now, e-bikes are okay on the sidewalks.
Yep.
They're asking people to go with flow of traffic.
Yep.
So people see what's going on, so if the vehicle is traveling north, then the bike should be north on the sidewalk.
So this goes with that, so you have the bike is pointing this way with the arrow, so if you're driving a bike and you're seeing this thing going, you're going, oh, I'm on the wrong side of the road, right now, you don't know that, or if you're a visitor, you don't know that, and that's what this addresses. And telling people, you need to share the sidewalk with both groups, or if you're on a bike, no bikes from here to here type of thing.
And again, there's a bunch of people this has to go through, the town,
Yeah, I
the
know.
town management first, the town board, of course, who has ultimate say here with the town manager, but also it has to go back to county.
Yeah.
The county has to also be part of that,
I
because they own that space for the most part. We cohabitate it, but they own it for the most part, so know that they have to be part of that discussion.
Is there a way, do we advocate it to Lee County? Is that something
Or
we
do we
take?
wait until we have more data?
Yeah, like.
I would say let me work this through with management first.
Okay.
And then have more conversation with the mayor, who's the liaison here.
Yep.
Yeah.
And see how they would like to do that, 'cause some of that has been started already.
Yep.
And I don't know how far that's gone, so
Okay.
let us get a little more research on that.
Perfect. God, I keep wanting to say something, I keep getting sidetracked. Obviously, it's not that important. That's it.
I'll say something so they can think about what you're
Okay.
wanting to do. The R2P2 study, you mentioned a little bit that they're still working through. I think everyone had a chance to take a look at that. What is the next steps with them as far as specific? That's a whole study of many different topics.
It is.
One section of that was around bike lanes and what they would like to see, and then there was a map of a route that went from beach over into the to the residential areas, and then back onto Estero, and so there's some ideas there. But I want to know, how do we turn some of those ideas into reality?
I think the next step is town management again,
Okay.
digesting it properly, town board digesting it, and deciding the next mission plan for that. So I don't wanna speak to it until they have more time to go through that, to be honest with you. So I know it's in everybody's thoughts, but it's something that they're working through, cause with that being said, yeah, there's great, that plan's done very well, but some of those routes go through neighborhoods, some of them are progressions through spaces that maybe the town doesn't have total control of,
Right.
so there's other stuff that has to happen with that,
That's one of the things that I proposed.
yes.
But I said, if you've got these new companies coming in and what's public benefit, we've got lots that are gonna help join all these different places together, and maybe some of them are not buildable, like they're very tiny lots, like, okay, we've got 27 lots that are gonna try to make this golf cart lane or this northbound, electric golf cart lane or whatever you wanna call it, lane feasible, buy some of these lots to help make it's gonna mitigate traffic through the island. We've got so much available right now, or,
Yeah.
anyway.
Who, I was just kind of curious, someone has to do that, like, is that something that our committee can do, or is the town planning, like, kind of walk it, you know?
I've
just
done
like-
it
yeah.
twice, but yeah, we can do it again. I mean,
It has been,
Yeah.
it's been
I think
driven
it's-
as much as we could drive, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
part of it.
I think
So-
everybody kind of knows behind this building, there's an
Yeah.
easement, behind
Yeah.
over here, there's
Okay.
this, behind there.
So there's that,
And,
okay.
and there's many times that the rangers and code officers, we take that route just to get around traffic
Yep.
sometimes, rather than hitting.
There's gonna be a
beach, you know.
super secret route,
Yeah.
one of these days.
So, it'll be worked out.
Don't put that on
Okay.
TV. I'm just kidding. Okay, I think that's it.
I've got one more thing.
Oh.
We've gone over that deal of fixing up sidewalks up and down Estero. I've noticed down kind of by Anchorage area, Connecticut area, there's some large areas of sidewalk that's busted out again for some reason. I don't know why. If you want, I can take some pictures of them, send them to you, or if I
If you
still have that
would.
app.
Yeah,
If you would send me again, if you come across something that you see that's open, that's been opened post storms, that could be because we're doing utility work. We or the county is doing a bunch of utility work with telecommunications and stuff. So some of that may be removed, but let's get that list moving again so we can make sure that gets expedited to get some of those stuff.
Yeah, just riding up and down a lot, you see it because people are jogging and all of a sudden they're coming out into the street
And PW does document it, we document it as well, so, but it helps anytime you're seeing something, you know, you live here, you're out there every day around, so please.
send them to you.
Yeah, send them
Yeah.
to me, please.
Crescent, most of Crescent.
Yes.
Yeah.
That,
Yeah, you're right. As
on
soon
the
as
other
you come
side
around
from
the corner,
Margaritaville
that
is,
sidewalk's
It-
is a disaster.
Yeah, that's
It is,
bad.
it is torn up pretty big, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's town property, so it's something that we are aware of, but yes, if you see it, please keep sending photos so we can make sure we're updating and getting the newest photo of what's happening there.
I did remember, and I think you guys know about it, I just don't know if you're doing anything. Bayside Park, around those trees are the metal grates, and around the metal grates, the circular, there's like 4 separate circular, I don't know what you wanna call them, like, they pop off, and they're missing. And we had an event this last weekend with the Putt and Pub, and 2 people fell in the hole, like with their feet, cause it's very crowded and they didn't see it, and one lady got severely hurt. Later in the day, I saw a
Was the
town.
fire department called for EMS on that?
No, she wasn't that bad. I mean, she hobbled away.
Okay.
But I'm just saying lawsuit potential for the town. But also, then a guy came by later in the day and I grabbed him and he was putting cones on top of it. And I said, okay, well, they're getting moved because there were no cones there all morning. We ended up putting boxes on top of them. So
So who
people,
put the cones up? Town staff?
town staff.
Yeah, okay.
But I just, I think almost every tree, it's the trees, they're missing these little circular discs that are popping off, and then there's a huge hole in there, and she fell, she just scraped her ankle really bad, it hurt, but it wasn't like she was hurt bad, but not like broke a leg or anything,
Okay.
just
Yeah.
saying.
That's all right. Well, I'll put the message out to PW and see where we stand on it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's something they're working on already.
Yeah.
Remember, that's part of our parks and stuff, so we do pay attention to that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the cones went out that morning because one of the rangers put out a message to somebody.
Somebody must have
Or
called
one of
in
the PW
already,
people.
yeah, so
So-
anyway, that was just it. Other than that, I don't have anything else. I think we need to set our next, oh.
I have one.
Yeah.
Yellow line down the middle of Old San Carlos. Everybody just drives down the middle of the street, and then oncoming traffic, just sit there and look at each other and tie up traffic.
That is true, they do that.
Yellow line down the middle would probably help everybody visualize better how to stay on their side.
Okay. I will put that out to PW and find out what the restriction is, if there's a restriction on what can be there. Because there are DOT restrictions as to what we can put, but yellow line sounds great to me. Again, I'm not an FDOT engineer, so we'll get that part. So I'll put it out to them and I'll have a better idea what we can and will do, okay?
Thank you.
Okay. I think that's it, we just gotta set up our next meeting. I don't even know when we're supposed to be. Do you know when our next one is?
I think it's the week of the 18th, or the week of the 17th. So the 18th, that Tuesday. I know I'm away that week. but I don't know. If everyone else is here, then I could try to call in.
Well, let's put it down for the 18th. Well, it's the 3rd. That's what no, that's the second one. No, that's the 3rd. And you can call in. That's easy.
Yeah, if everyone else is available, that's fine.
Yeah.
No? Yeah? What?
Seventeenth is President's Day, so council will meet on the eighteenth anyway.
Okay, so,
Then we get
oh wait, no, we have it set for the 20th. We already have it set for the 20th.
20th. Oh, the 20th.
Oh, then I'll have to call in,
That's fine.
I think.
It's a Thursday.
Yeah, there was something going on that we,
Yeah, actually, didn't move because of.
yeah.
So we might need to move that too.
I don't know, we have some DELA cases, magistrate cases and stuff, so I wanna make sure that hasn't collapsed.
All right.
Yeah.
How about the 25th?
Todd, make sure you're not out there in those rubber shoes, please, in the high water. To speak to that,
Oh, I was like,
after
what
the
is
last
this?
storm, with our people out there, PW, the Rangers, utilities and stuff, we did buy different boots for them as they're moving through the space. So for the Rangers, and code people, I ordered, the 20th is good?
Okay.
I ordered
Ron,
boots
you
with
can call in.
I'll have to
metal
call in.
That's
shanks.
fine.
I'll have to call.
Because I had 2 Rangers moving through, checking on something, and they ended up on a board with a nail. They didn't puncture their foot, but, so just be conscious of that. With this high water that happens here on this island and all this construction, even though we do push the construction companies to store their stuff in the right place and have it strapped down, some of it does move.
No, that walking around in that, I've seen the sanitary sewer bubbling up.
I see people walking barefoot, and I'm like, oh god.
I don't like putting my feet down where I
Yeah.
don't know where they're going,
Yeah.
so,
Exactly.
yeah.
Okay, all right, well set. Anything else? Are we good to go? Meeting adjourned? Make a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to join.
Second that.